The council chamber floated in the void between stars, a massive structure built by civilizations that had mastered space travel for thousands of years. Inside, representatives from 40 different species gathered around a circular platform. Some breathed oxygen, others methane. Some had scales, others had skin that shifted like liquid metal. They all came together to decide the fate of worlds. Ambassador Dae-hyun stood at the human podium, his hands gripping the edges as he watched the vote counter. The numbers climbed higher and higher. Red symbols filled the display screen. The Galactic Council was voting to do nothing. The Veltari were dying. Their world was under attack by the Drakmar Empire, a military power that wanted their planet for mining operations. The Veltari were made of living crystal, beautiful beings that reflected light in rainbow patterns. They moved slowly and communicated by changing colors across their transparent bodies. They had no weapons, no military, no way to defend themselves. The vote finished. 40 species voted to abstain. Only one voted to intervene. Humanity. The council speaker, a tall insectoid creature named Klaxith, clicked his mandibles together. The decision is made. The Veltari situation will resolve itself naturally. This council believes in the principle of survival. The strong survive. The weak do not. This is the way of the galaxy. Dae-hyun felt anger rise in his chest. He pressed the communication button on his podium. Then Earth will act alone. The chamber fell silent. Every alien eye, sensor, and visual organ turned toward the human ambassador. Klaxith's antennae twitched. You cannot be serious. Humanity has been in space for only 70 years. You have 12 colony worlds and a defense fleet of 300 ships. The Drakmar Empire commands 5,000 vessels. You will lose. Maybe, Dae-hyun said. His voice was calm but firm. But we will try anyway, because trying to save innocent lives is more important than protecting ourselves. A rippling sound filled the chamber. It was laughter. The alien representatives found this amusing. One species, the crystalline prism lords, transmitted a message that appeared as floating text. Humanity suffers from emotional defect. Your survival instincts are broken. You will extinct yourselves with this foolishness. Dae-hyun gathered his papers and walked toward the exit. Before leaving, he turned back. You call it a defect. We call it being decent. 3 weeks later, Captain Hyun-woo stood on the bridge of the UES Incheon, flagship of humanity's hastily assembled relief fleet. Through the viewport, he could see Veltar Prime, a world that sparkled like a jewel. The planet's surface was covered in crystal forests that caught sunlight and transformed it into cascading waves of color. It was also surrounded by Drakmar warships. Blocky, brutal vessels painted in dark red and black. Status report, Hyun-woo said. His tactical officer responded. 18 Drakmar destroyers in orbit. 6 more on the surface conducting bombardment operations. They are targeting population centers. Hyun-woo watched as a beam of energy lanced down from one of the destroyers, striking the planet below. Even from orbit he could see the explosion, a flash of light that meant hundreds or thousands of Veltari had just died. All ships, Hyun-woo transmitted across the fleet channel. This is Captain Hyun-woo. Our mission is simple. We protect civilians. We evacuate as many Veltari as possible. We hold the line until every ship is loaded. Rules of engagement are defensive only unless fired upon. Show them what humanity stands for. The human fleet moved forward. 28 ships against a force designed to crush them. The Drakmar noticed immediately. Their commander transmitted a message in the common galactic language. Human vessels, you are interfering in Drakmar territorial expansion. Leave or be destroyed, Hyun-woo responded. Veltar Prime is not your territory. These are innocent people. We will not leave, then die. The Drakmar ships opened fire. Energy weapons slashed through space, impacting human shields. The human ships returned fire, but their weapons were older, less powerful. 2 human destroyers took critical damage in the first exchange, but the humans did not retreat. They positioned their ships between the Drakmar fleet and the planet, creating a defensive screen. Shuttles launched from human carriers, racing toward the surface to begin evacuation operations. On the ground, Dr. Jisoo climbed out of her transport shuttle, her boots touching crystalline soil for the first time. The air was thin here, requiring her to wear a breathing mask. Around her, Veltari civilians clustered together, their bodies dim with fear. When they were afraid, their light faded to a dull gray. A Veltari elder approached her. The being was massive, at least 3 meters tall. its body composed of thousands of interlocking crystal plates. Colors rippled across its surface in patterns Jisoo could not yet understand. Her translator device analyzed the light patterns and converted them to words. "You are the humans? You came to help us?" Jisoo nodded. "Yes, we are here to evacuate your people." "How many are in this settlement?" 40,000. "But we cannot move quickly. Our young are still forming their primary structures. They are too fragile to transport easily." Jisoo pulled up a data pad and began calculating. Shuttle capacity, number of trips needed, time available before the Drakmar broke through the orbital defense. The numbers were not good. They could not save everyone, but they could save some. "We will take as many as we can," Jisoo said. "Prioritize the children and elderly. Everyone who can fit we will carry." The elder's body shifted to a deep blue color. Jisoo's translator indicated this meant profound gratitude mixed with sorrow. "Why do you do this? You gain nothing from saving us. Your ships are dying in orbit to protect strangers." Jisoo looked up at the sky where she could see flashes of light as human and Drakmar vessels exchanged fire. She thought about the crews up there, people she had trained with, friends who were risking everything. She thought about humanity's history, all the times they had failed to help each other and all the times they had succeeded. "Because you need help," she said simply. "That is enough reason." Over the next 6 hours, human shuttles made continuous runs between the surface and the fleet carriers in orbit. They loaded Veltari civilians by the thousands, cramming them into cargo holds and passenger compartments. The crystalline beings were fragile, prone to cracking under stress, so the humans handled them with extreme care. In orbit, the battle intensified. 3 more human ships were destroyed. The Drakmar commander transmitted multiple demands for surrender. Hyunwoo refused each time. By the time the last shuttle lifted off, the human fleet had evacuated 73,000 Veltari. It was not everyone. Many thousands remained behind, unable to be saved. But it was 73,000 lives that would continue. "All ships, jump sequence initiated," Hyunwoo ordered. "We are leaving." The human fleet engaged their faster-than-light drives and vanished into the darkness between stars, carrying refugees to safety. Back at the Galactic Council station, Daehyun filed an official report. The mission had cost humanity 5 destroyers, 1 carrier, and 412 crew members. In exchange, they had saved an alien species that offered no strategic value, no trade opportunities, no military alliance. The other council members read the report with confusion. The action made no sense according to galactic logic. Resources had been spent with no return. Lives had been sacrificed for strangers. But in the human quarters of the station, Daehyun slept peacefully that night. 73,000 beings were alive because humanity had chosen to act. In his mind, that was all the logic needed. The galaxy was about to learn that humans played by different rules. The research laboratory was cold and sterile, exactly how Vexthor preferred it. The Shakarn scientist stood on his 4 legs, his reptilian body covered in overlapping scales that shifted from green to gray depending on his mood. Before him floated a 3-dimensional display showing human brain scans. "Fascinating," he muttered, his forked tongue tasting the air. "Absolutely fascinating and completely irrational." His assistant, a younger Shakarn named Pelmix, approached with a data tablet. "Director, you have been studying human neurology for 3 weeks now. What have you discovered?" Vexthor manipulated the holographic controls, zooming in on a specific region of the human brain. "I have discovered why humans do what they do, and I have discovered why every other species in the galaxy considers them dangerously unstable." He pulled up comparison scans showing brain structures from 12 different species. "Look here. This is the empathy center in a typical spacefaring species. It activates when the being encounters another member of their own species in distress. It is an evolutionary tool for maintaining social cohesion within the group. Do you see?" Pelmix nodded. "Yes, Director. All social species have this structure. Now look at the human brain." Vexithor highlighted the same region in the human scan. It was glowing brightly, at least 3 times larger than the equivalent structure in other species. The human empathy center activates not just for other humans. It activates for any species displaying distress signals: dogs, cats, birds, fish, even insects. And now, as we have observed, it activates for alien species they have never encountered before. "That seems inefficient," Pelmix said. Why would evolution produce such a response? It should not have, Vexthor replied. By all logical principles, this trait should have been eliminated thousands of years ago. Caring about other species provides no survival advantage. It wastes resources. It creates vulnerability. Yet somehow humans not only developed this trait, but made it stronger over time. It is a defect, a glitch in their evolutionary programming, and it makes them the most dangerous species in the galaxy. Dangerous? But they are so weak compared to the old powers. Vexthor's scales turn dark red, indicating deep concern. Dangerous precisely because they do not think like us. They will act in ways that cannot be predicted by standard strategic models. They will sacrifice themselves for beings they do not know. They will protect the weak even when it hurts them. This breaks every rule of galactic civilization. While Vexthor studied brain scans in his laboratory, Lieutenant Tae-sung was experiencing the human defect firsthand on the surface of Veltar Prime. The evacuation was not complete. Thousands of Veltari still remained on the planet, hiding in the crystal caves beneath the surface. The Drakmar had landed ground forces to hunt them down. This meant human marines had to stay behind to buy time for the remaining civilians to reach the extraction points. Tae-sung crouched behind a formation of crystal spires, his rifle raised. His squad of 8 marines spread out around him, taking defensive positions. Across the clearing, he could see a group of Veltari refugees moving slowly toward the extraction point. There were maybe 30 of them, including several juveniles. Veltari juveniles were heartbreaking to watch. They had not yet formed their full crystal structure, so their bodies were partially transparent. You could see light passing through them. They moved by rolling awkwardly, unable to walk properly yet. They depended completely on adults for protection. Contact, Corporal Minseo said from her position on the left flank. Drakmar patrol incoming. Squad strength maybe 10 soldiers. Tae-sung raised his binoculars. He could see them now. Drakmar warriors in their distinctive red armor carrying heavy plasma rifles. They moved with the confidence of predators who had never been challenged. The Veltari were right in the open. They would be slaughtered. All Marines prepare to engage, Tae-sung said calmly. We hold here. Do not let them reach the civilians. The Drakmar spotted the Veltari at the same moment. They raised their weapons, preparing to fire. Tae-sung squeezed his trigger first. The battle lasted 4 minutes. Human kinetic rifles against Drakmar plasma weapons. The Drakmar had better equipment and better training. But the humans had something else. They had a reason to fight that went beyond orders or territory. When the firefight ended, 6 Drakmar lay dead or wounded. But the cost was high. 2 human marines were killed. 3 more were injured, including Minseo, who took a plasma bolt to her shoulder while shielding a Veltari juvenile who had panicked and frozen in the open. Tae-sung ran to Minseo's position. The medic was already working on her, applying emergency sealant to the burn wound. Minisio's face was pale with pain, but she was looking past Tae-sung toward the juvenile Veltari she had protected. The kid okay? She asked through gritted teeth. Tae-sung looked. The juvenile was rolling toward its parent, its crystalline body flashing with colors that the translator interpreted as relief and gratitude. The kid is fine. You saved it. Good, Minseo said, and then passed out from the pain. They got the civilians to the extraction point. The shuttle arrived and loaded everyone aboard. As the craft lifted into the sky, Tae-sung watched through the window as the Veltari refugees pressed against the far wall, giving the wounded humans space. The Veltari elder who had spoken to Jisoo earlier approached Tae-sung carefully. Colors rippled across the elder's surface. The translator converted it to words. Your soldier was hurt saving our child. She almost died for a being she does not know, from a species she met only days ago. This makes no sense to me. Why would she do this? Tae-sung looked back at Minseo, who was unconscious on a medical stretcher. He thought about the question. It was a good question. Minseo had a family back on Earth, a husband, 2 children. She had every reason to stay in cover and protect herself. But when she saw that juvenile in danger, she had not even hesitated. Because that is what humans do. Tae-sung said finally. We see someone in trouble and we help. It does not matter if they are human or not. It does not matter if we know them. Pain is pain. Fear is fear. And we cannot just watch and do nothing. The elder's colors shifted through several patterns. Confusion, wonder, disbelief. Your species is very strange. Yeah, Tae-sung agreed. We get that a lot. The shuttle docked with the fleet carrier in orbit. Medical teams rushed to treat the wounded. Jisoo was there, coordinating care for both human and Veltari patients. She moved between them without distinction, applying her medical knowledge to very different biologies. A Veltari with a cracked crystal structure, a human with plasma burns, a Veltari juvenile suffering from stress fractures, a human marine with a broken leg. Jisoo treated them all with the same level of care and attention. The Veltari elder watched her work with fascination. "You have medical training for our species? We have been in contact for less than 1 month." Jisoo looked up from the juvenile she was stabilizing. "I do not have much training. I have been reading everything I can find about your biology and making my best guesses, but pain is pain and suffering is suffering. I have to try." That night, as the human fleet jumped through hyperspace toward safety, Vexthor received footage of the ground battle. He watched it 3 times, analyzing every action. He watched Minseo throw herself in front of the juvenile. He watched Taesung's squad hold their position despite being outgunned. He watched Jisoo treat alien patients with improvised techniques. He compiled all his research into a report for the Galactic Council. The title was simple: The Human Defect, Analysis of Irrational Empathy Response and Its Implications for Galactic Security. In the report, he wrote, "Humans possess a neurological defect that causes them to experience empathy for all beings, not just their own species. This defect drives them to take actions that are strategically unsound and tactically dangerous. They will sacrifice their own safety and resources to protect strangers. They will risk their lives for beings that offer no evolutionary advantage. This makes them unpredictable and potentially destabilizing to galactic order. Recommendation: monitor closely and contain if necessary." But as Vexthor submitted the report, he felt something unusual. A small sensation in his own brain. A tiny activation in regions that had been dormant for most of his life. He had watched that footage of humans protecting Veltari over and over. He had seen the way they cared. And somewhere deep inside, in a part of his brain that evolution had tried to eliminate, Vexthor felt the beginning of something that scared him. He felt respect. The emergency session of Earth's unified government lasted 14 hours. Representatives from every nation and colony crowded into the assembly hall in Geneva, arguing over what to do next. Outside, protesters filled the streets. Some carried signs supporting the Veltari rescue. Others demanded that Earth focus on its own problems. Ambassador Dae-hyun stood at the podium, exhausted but determined. "In the 3 weeks since we evacuated Veltar Prime, we have received 417 formal requests for assistance. 17 of these are species facing immediate extinction threats. The rest are asking for various forms of protection or sanctuary." The representative from the Mars colonies raised his hand. "How can we possibly help 17 species? We can barely defend our own territory." "We cannot," Dae-hyun admitted. "Not all at once. Not perfectly. But we can do something. We can offer sanctuary. We can share our worlds. We can stand between them and those who would destroy them." "And what do we gain from this?" asked the European Union delegate. Dae-hyun looked around the room. "What did we gain from saving the Veltari? Nothing material. No trade agreements, no military alliance, no strategic advantage. But 73,000 beings are alive who would otherwise be dead. That is what we gained. The knowledge that when we had the power to help, we did. The vote was close, but it passed. Earth would establish the sanctuary doctrine. Any species facing extinction or severe persecution could petition humanity for protection. Earth and her colonies would provide safe harbor, military defense, and assistance in establishing new settlements. Admiral Sang-hoon received his orders 3 days later. He was to form and command the Sanctuary Fleet, a volunteer force dedicated to protecting refugee species. He stood in his quarters on the naval station above Earth, looking at the roster of ships assigned to his command. 32 vessels. Not nearly enough, but within a week something unexpected happened. More ships arrived. Commercial vessels retrofitted with defensive weapons. Private yachts converted to transports. Colony defense ships reassigned. Crews volunteered by the thousands. Engineers, doctors, pilots, Marines all stepping forward to join the Sanctuary Fleet. Sang-hoon's 32 ships became 80, then 120. Humanity was responding. One of the first species to arrive was the Kixelar, a race of small, 6-legged beings who looked like a cross between crabs and cats. Their homeworld had been conquered by an expanding empire, and the survivors had nowhere to go. They communicated through musical tones that human translators converted to speech. Engineer Yu Jin met the first Kixlar transport at Docking Bay 7. When the airlock opened, she saw hundreds of them crowded together, their shells dulled with stress. The ship's air smelled of ammonia, which meant she needed to wear a breathing mask during the inspection. "Welcome," she said through the translator. "I am Yu Jin. I will be helping prepare accommodations for your people." The Kixlar leader approached, walking on 4 legs while holding a data device in its other 2 limbs. "You will truly shelter us? We have nothing to offer in trade." Yu Jin smiled behind her mask. "You do not need to offer anything. You need help. That is enough." But helping was complicated. The Kixlar breathed an ammonia-nitrogen mix. They required high humidity. Their diet was based on sulfur compounds that were toxic to humans. They reproduced by laying eggs that needed very specific temperature conditions. Yu Jin spent 3 weeks redesigning habitat modules. She worked with alien biologists to understand Kixlar needs. She tested life support systems dozens of times. She failed repeatedly and learned from each failure. Finally, she had a design that worked: modular habitats that could maintain ammonia atmospheres, control humidity, and provide proper nutrition. The first Kixlar colony was established on humanity's mining colony at Tau Ceti 4. But the Kixlar were just the first. Next came the Weaver folk, beings made of living thread who wove themselves into different shapes. Then the deep speakers, whale-like creatures who lived in liquid methane. Then the hive mothers, insect beings who communicated through pheromones. Each species presented unique challenges. Each required custom solutions. Yu Jin worked until she collapsed from exhaustion, then woke up and worked more. She was not alone. Thousands of human engineers across dozens of colonies were doing the same work. Diplomat Bora handled the political side. She drafted the formal sanctuary accords, establishing the rules for how refugee species would be integrated into human space. It was delicate work. Some species had been enemies with each other. Some had incompatible religious beliefs. Some had territorial instincts that made them aggressive toward neighbors. Bora met with representatives from each species, listening to their concerns and finding compromises. She learned how to bow in 17 different ways. She memorized the cultural taboos of 23 civilizations. She mediated disputes that ranged from the trivial to the potentially violent. During one particularly difficult negotiation, a Weaver folk representative asked her, "Why do you work so hard for us? Your species gains nothing from this burden." Bora had been awake for 36 hours straight, surviving on coffee and determination. She looked at the Weaver folk, at its body composed of thousands of individual threads woven into a humanoid shape, and she thought about her answer carefully. "My grandmother was a refugee during the Korean War," Bora said. "She fled south with nothing but the clothes she wore and my infant mother in her arms. Strangers gave them food and shelter. People who had very little themselves shared what they had. My grandmother never forgot that kindness. She taught my mother, who taught me, when you have the power to help someone, you do it. Not because you will gain something, but because it is right." The Weaver folk's thread shifted into patterns that indicated deep thought. "This is a cultural value, teaching compassion across generations." "It is more than culture," Bora said. "It is who we are." But not everyone in the galaxy approved of humanity's actions. The Galactic Council called an emergency session specifically to address the human problem. Dae-Hyun attended via holographic transmission, appearing as a translucent figure in the council chamber. Klaxith, the insectoid speaker, addressed him directly. "Ambassador, your species is disrupting the natural order of galactic civilization. You are protecting species that should not survive. You are interfering with expansion rights of established powers. You are creating precedents that could destabilize thousands of years of tradition." Dae-Hyun kept his voice calm. "We are protecting innocent lives. If that disrupts your traditions, perhaps your traditions need to be disrupted." The chamber erupted with angry responses. Dozens of species transmitted protests, but some stayed silent, watching and listening. "You cannot sustain this," Klaxith continued. "Your economy will collapse. Your military will be overstretched. Your own people will suffer." "Maybe," Dae-Hyun admitted. "But we will try anyway. Because the alternative is to watch genocide after genocide and do nothing. We cannot live with that choice." Then your species will die, Klaxith said flatly. You will burn yourselves out trying to save everyone. This is the fate of those who ignore the principle of survival. Daehyun smiled sadly. Then we will burn brightly. And maybe, just maybe, we will light the way for others. He ended the transmission and sat alone in his office, staring at reports of refugee arrivals. More species every day, more needs to meet, more impossible logistics to solve. His assistant entered carrying another stack of requests. Sir, 3 more species have petitioned for sanctuary. 1 is facing a plague. 1 is being hunted for sport by a warrior culture. 1 lost their homeworld to stellar expansion and has nowhere to go. Daehyun looked at the reports. Each one was a story of desperation. Each one represented thousands or millions of lives hanging in the balance. Process the applications, he said. We will find a way. Sir, we are already at capacity. Our resources are stretched. Admiral Sang-hoon reports that the Sanctuary Fleet is responding to threats in 4 different sectors simultaneously. We cannot keep up. Daehyun stood and walked to his window, looking out at Earth below. Then we build more ships. We train more crews. We find more resources. We do what humans have always done when faced with impossible challenges. We find a way or we make one. 6 months after the Veltari evacuation, the Sanctuary Doctrine had protected 9 species from extinction, relocated 40,000 refugees, and established 12 new colony habitats designed for alien life. The cost was enormous. Human economic growth had slowed. Military resources were stretched thin. Several colonies faced shortages. But in a quiet moment, Admiral Sang-hoon stood on the observation deck of his flagship, watching a convoy of transports carrying Kixelar refugees to their new home. The small crabcat beings pressed against the windows of their ships, looking at the stars with what his translator interpreted as hope. One of his officers approached. Admiral, we just received a distress call from the Lintar Commonwealth. They are a peaceful aquatic species. An aggressive neighbor is invading their territory. Sang-hoon pulled up the star charts. The Lintar homeworld was 3 weeks away at best speed. How long do they have? Maybe 2 weeks before the invasion fleet arrives at their homeworld. Then we leave immediately. Sang-hoon turned to his bridge crew. All ships prepare for emergency jump. The Sanctuary Fleet moves. The warning came too late. New Pyongyang was a modest colony world in the outer reaches of human space. 4 million people called it home. Mostly Korean families who had emigrated 3 generations ago to build a new life among the stars. The planet had vast agricultural zones that supplied food to a dozen human settlements. It had schools and hospitals and parks where children played. It also had minimal military defenses, because most of humanity's military resources were committed to the Sanctuary Fleet. The Drakmar Empire noticed this vulnerability. Governor. Hee-jin was in her office reviewing crop reports when the first alarm sounded. She pulled up the Defense Network display and felt her blood turn cold. 16 Drakmar warships had just emerged from hyperspace in orbit around New Pyongyang. Their weapons were already charging. Get me General Wu Jin, she said to her communications officer. Emergency priority. But before the connection could be established, the bombardment began. The Drakmar did not target military installations. They did not target infrastructure or government buildings. They targeted population centers, schools, hospitals, residential districts, the places where families lived. Energy beams lanced down from orbit, each one releasing destructive power equivalent to a nuclear weapon. The capital city vanished in the first 30 seconds. 500,000 people died instantly. The shockwave flattened buildings for 50 kilometers in every direction. Then the Drakmar moved to the next city. And the next Hee-jin watched in horror as her world burned. The defense platforms returned fire, but they were too few and too weak. One by one, the Drakmar ships destroyed them. The colony's single military frigate, the CSV Jeju, charged the enemy fleet in a desperate attempt to draw their fire. It lasted less than 2 minutes before being torn apart. In her office, deep underground in the colony's administration bunker, Hye-jin transmitted evacuation orders to the remaining cities. But there was nowhere to evacuate to. The shelters could not protect against orbital bombardment. The transport ships were too slow to escape. She watched the casualty counter climb. 1 million, 2 million, 3 million. When the bombardment finally stopped 3 hours after it began, 70% of New Pyongyang's population was dead. The agricultural zones were burning. The water processing plants were destroyed. The atmospheric processors were offline. The world was dying. The Drakmar transmitted one message before jumping back to hyperspace. This is the price of interfering with Drakmar expansion. Abandon your sanctuary species or more worlds will burn. The news reached Earth within hours. Humanity's communication networks exploded with rage, grief, and demands for retaliation. Protesters filled the streets of every major city. Some demanded immediate war against the Drakmar Empire. Others demanded abandonment of the sanctuary doctrine. The government was paralyzed by the scope of the tragedy. General Wu Jin sat in the war room beneath Geneva, staring at tactical displays that showed the Drakmar Empire's military strength. He had spent 40 years in the military, rising from a young lieutenant to commander of Earth's unified defense forces. He had fought in 3 wars and made decisions that cost thousands of lives. But he had never felt anything like this. 3 million civilians dead, not soldiers, not military targets, families, children, murdered to make a political point. His staff officers stood around the table waiting for orders. They all knew what the admiral was considering. Humanity had nuclear weapons, antimatter torpedoes, kinetic bombardment systems. They could strike back. They could hurt the Drakmar. "Sir," his tactical officer said quietly, "we have authorization codes ready. We can launch strikes against 12 Drakmar military targets within 6 hours. Estimated casualties on their side would be in the millions." Wu Jin looked at the target list. Military bases, shipyards, command centers. All legitimate targets. All justified under any military doctrine. The Drakmar had struck first. Earth had every right to respond. But he thought about what Ambassador Dae-hyun had said months ago. "We do what is right, not what is easy." "No," Wu Jin said finally. "We do not retaliate." The room erupted with protests. "Sir, they killed 3 million people." "I know what they did," Wu Jin said, his voice hard as iron. "And if we respond with equal brutality, we become them. We do not murder civilians to make a point. We defend, we protect. We do not massacre. Then what do we do?" Wu Jin stood, his hands gripping the edge of the tactical table. "We increase patrols around all vulnerable colonies. We reinforce defensive positions. We evacuate civilians from exposed settlements. And we continue the sanctuary doctrine. We do not let terrorists dictate our values." Captain Hyunwoo received the orders while his fleet was escorting a convoy of Weaver folk refugees to their new settlement. The news of New Pyongyang hit him like a physical blow. His sister lived there. Had lived there. Past tense now. He tried to contact her for 2 hours before accepting that she was gone. She had been a teacher at an elementary school in the capital. The capital that no longer existed. His tactical officer approached carefully. "Captain, the crew is requesting permission to break convoy and return to Earth. They want to be with their families. They want to prepare for war." Hyunwoo looked at the convoy ships visible through the viewport. Hundreds of Weaver folk families aboard those transports fleeing from persecution, trusting humanity to keep them safe. "Denied," he said. "We complete the mission. We get these refugees to safety. Then we return to Earth." "But sir, your sister—" "My sister is dead," Hyunwoo interrupted, his voice cracking. "Nothing I do will change that. But these refugees are alive, and keeping them that way means something. It has to mean something." He stood on the bridge for the next 4 hours watching the convoy progress toward the colony world. He did not eat. He did not sleep. He just stood there, maintaining course, doing his duty. On the surface of New Pyongyang, survivors emerged from underground shelters to find their world transformed into hell. Fires burned across entire continents. The air was thick with ash. Bodies lay everywhere. Medical officer Min Seo had survived the initial bombardment by chance. She had been inspecting an underground medical facility when the attack came. Now she moved through the ruins, providing what aid she could with limited supplies. She found a little girl sitting alone in the wreckage of what had been a neighborhood. The child could not have been more than 6 years old. She was covered in dust and blood, clutching a stuffed animal. Min Seo knelt beside her. "Are you hurt?" Min Seo asked gently. The girl shook her head. She had not said a word since Min Seo found her. "Where are your parents?" The girl pointed at the rubble. Min Seo understood. They were buried somewhere in that collapsed building. Dead. Min Seo picked up the girl and carried her toward the aid station. As she walked through the devastation, She saw movement in the ruins ahead. At first, she thought it was other survivors. Then she realized what she was looking at. Veltari. A group of 20 Veltari refugees who had been living in a sanctuary settlement on the far side of the planet had made their way to the capital ruins. Their crystalline bodies reflected the fires burning around them. They were digging through rubble with their manipulator limbs, searching for survivors. One of them saw Minseo and approached. Its colors shifted to patterns that indicated concern and determination. The translator converted it to words. Medical Officer Minseo, we remember you from Veltar Prime. You helped save us. Now we help save your people. Minseo felt tears streaming down her face. You should not be here. It is dangerous. The structures could collapse. We are fragile, the Veltari admitted. We break easily. But you taught us something important. You taught us that protecting others is more important than protecting ourselves. So we dig, we search. We save who we can save. Over the next few days, Veltari refugees worked alongside human survivors in rescue operations. They worked until their crystal bodies cracked from stress. They lifted rubble despite risking shattering. 3 of them died when a building collapsed while they were searching for trapped humans. The galactic news networks covered this extensively. Images of crystalline aliens working desperately to save human lives spread across thousands of worlds. The Veltari elder who had questioned Jisoo about human motivations gave an interview that was broadcast to 40 species. Humans died to save us when they had no reason to, the elder said, its body glowing with somber colors. Now humans die again, killed by those who fear what humans represent. We cannot repay the debt we owe them, but we can honor their example. We protect the weak. We help the suffering. This is what humans taught us. This is what we will teach others. When relief ships finally arrived from Earth carrying supplies and reinforcements, they found humans and Veltari working side by side in the ruins. General Wu Jin stood in the remains of the capital and made a public statement that was broadcast across human space. The Drakmar believe they have shown us the price of compassion, he said. They believe this tragedy will make us abandon the sanctuary doctrine. They are wrong. The price of compassion is paid in blood and tears. We know this. We have always known this, but the alternative is a galaxy where the strong devour the weak, where might makes right, where life has no value beyond strategic advantage. We reject that galaxy. We will pay the price. We will bear the cost. 6 months after New Pyongyang, Ambassador Daehyun received an unexpected visitor. The representative of the Thraxian collective asked for a private meeting. This was unusual. The Thraxians were a mid-level power, neither weak nor dominant. They had stayed neutral on most galactic issues, focusing on their own territory and interests. The Thraxian ambassador was named Korval, a being that looked like a cross between a bear and a crab. Covered in chitinous plates with multiple limbs, he entered Daehyun's office and sat in a specially designed chair that could support his bulk. Ambassador Daehyun, Korval began, his voice translated from clicking sounds. I come with a proposal that my government believes will change the galaxy. Daehyun leaned forward with interest. I am listening. We want to join your sanctuary doctrine. But more than that, we want to formalize it into an alliance. A coalition of species committed to protecting vulnerable civilizations. Not just humans doing this work alone, but multiple species working together. Daehyun was surprised. Why? You have maintained neutrality for centuries. What changed? Korval's plates shifted, a sign of discomfort. New Pyongyang changed things. We watched you lose 3 million of your people, and we watched how you responded. No retaliation, no rage attacks, just continued dedication to protecting others. And then we watched the Veltari help you in return. We saw what your philosophy creates. Not just protection flowing one way, but genuine bonds between species. He pulled up a holographic display showing star charts. The Thraxian collective has always been pragmatic. We survive by being useful to stronger powers while not threatening them. But we realize now that this is not survival. It is just a slower form of extinction. We have no allies, only trading partners. No friends, only temporary agreements. If we were attacked tomorrow, no one would help us. But humans would. Daehyun said quietly. Yes, even though we have done nothing to deserve it. Even though we offer no strategic advantage. You would try to help us because that is what you do. Korval stood, his multiple limbs gesturing emphatically. We want to be part of that. We want to build a galaxy where species help each other not because of advantage, but because it is right. Within a month, 3 more species approached with similar proposals. The Prism Ascendancy, a collective of energy beings who lived in the electromagnetic spectrum. The World Chain Union, a democratic federation of 12 species who shared several star systems. And surprisingly, a faction of the Shakarn Dominion led by Director Vexthor himself. Diplomat Bora coordinated the negotiations. She worked 18-hour days, balancing the needs and concerns of 6 different species. The Thraxians wanted strong military commitments. The Prism beings wanted environmental protections for their unique habitats. The World Chain Union insisted on democratic voting procedures. The Shakarn faction wanted scientific collaboration agreements. It is like herding cats, Bora complained to Daehyun during one late-night planning session. Except the cats are 10 different species who cannot agree on basic definitions of words. But they are trying, Daehyun pointed out. That is what matters. The Guardian Coalition was formally established at a ceremony held in orbit around Earth. Representatives from 6 founding species signed the charter. The document was simple in its core principle. Member species committed to defend vulnerable civilizations from existential threats, regardless of strategic advantage or expected return. Article 1 stated, all sapient life has inherent value. Advanced civilizations have a moral obligation to protect those who cannot protect themselves. Article 2. Member species will contribute military, economic, and humanitarian resources to fulfill this obligation. Article 3. Decisions will be made by consensus, with each species having equal voice regardless of size or power. It was revolutionary. Nothing like it had existed in galactic history, but signing a charter was the easy part. Making it work was harder. Pilot Donghyun had been a fighter ace in the human navy before volunteering for the Sanctuary Fleet. Now he was assigned to train the first mixed species squadron. He stood in the briefing room of the training station looking at his new students. 3 humans, 2 Thraxians, 1 Prism being, manifesting as a glowing ball of light, and 1 Shakarn. They all looked back at him with various expressions of curiosity, concern, or in the Prism's case, pulsing light patterns. Welcome to Advanced Combat Flight School, Donghyun said. I am your instructor. For the next 8 weeks, I will train you to fly as a unified squadron. You will learn to trust each other with your lives. You will learn to coordinate across different species, different communication methods, different ways of thinking. It will be the hardest thing you have ever done. One of the Thraxian students, a young warrior named Brektor, raised a limb. Instructor, why do we need mixed squadrons? Would it not be more efficient for each species to fight in their own way? Good question, Donghyun replied. And the answer is no. Here is why. He pulled up a tactical simulation. This is the standard Drakmar attack formation. Notice how they use overlapping fields of fire, concentrate their strongest ships at breakthrough points, and maintain reserve forces for exploitation. A single-species squadron would respond according to their own tactical doctrine. Humans would prioritize protecting the vulnerable. Thraxians would seek honorable single combat. Prism beings would focus on disrupting enemy communications. The simulation played out. Each approach failed. Now watch this. Donghyun ran a different simulation. Mixed squadron. Humans provide defensive screening. Thraxians deliver heavy assault. Prism beings disrupt enemy coordination. Each species doing what they do best, working together. In this simulation, the mixed squadron won decisively. We are stronger together, Donghyun said. Not despite our differences, but because of them. The training was brutal. The species had completely different ways of thinking about combat. Humans thought in terms of objectives and acceptable casualties. Thraxians thought in terms of honor and individual glory. Prism beings thought in terms of energy flows and probability fields. The Shakarn thought in pure logic and efficiency. Arguments broke out constantly. During one training exercise, Brektor broke formation to pursue what he considered a worthy opponent for single combat, leaving the rest of the squadron exposed. Donghyun had to abort the exercise. What were you thinking? Donghyun demanded afterward. Brektor's plates bristled with indignation. I was thinking about honor. That enemy pilot challenged me directly. I could not refuse. And while you were chasing your honor, 2 of your wingmates got shot down. In simulation only. Today simulation. Tomorrow real death. Donghyun forced himself to calm down. I understand your culture values individual combat, but in this squadron we protect each other first. Honor comes from keeping your team alive. It took weeks, but slowly the squadron began to function. They learned each other's strengths and weaknesses. The humans learned to trust Thraxian aggressive tactics. The Thraxians learned to value human defensive positioning. The Prism being learned to coordinate with physical species. The Shikaran learned that pure logic sometimes needed to account for unpredictable factors like courage and desperation. By the end of training, they flew like a single organism. Different parts, one purpose. Meanwhile, Intelligence Officer Yunji was uncovering troubling patterns. She worked in a secure facility on Europa, analyzing data from across the galaxy. Her job was to identify threats before they materialized, and she had identified a big one. "Director, you need to see this," she said to her supervisor, pulling up a star chart covered in red markers. "What am I looking at?" "Military buildups. 19 different aggressive species, all increasing their fleet sizes simultaneously. They are coordinating but trying to hide it. They are forming a counter-alliance." Her supervisor leaned closer. "Counter to the Guardian Coalition?" "Yes, I'm calling it the Supremacy Pact. Their philosophy is the opposite of ours. They believe in survival of the fittest, expansion by conquest, and elimination of weak species. They see the Guardian Coalition as an existential threat to their way of life. Because we are." Yunji nodded grimly. "If we succeed, if our philosophy spreads, it undermines everything they have built. You cannot justify conquest if the galaxy agrees that all life has value. You cannot maintain military dominance if everyone cooperates to protect the weak. So they will try to destroy us before we become too strong." "Exactly." Yunji highlighted several systems on the map. "I predict they will launch coordinated strikes within 6 months. Their primary targets will be Guardian Coalition military bases, refugee settlements, and symbolic targets like the Veltari homeworld." The warning reached Admiral Sang-hoon, who immediately began reinforcing defensive positions. But there was a problem. The Guardian Coalition was still small and spread thin. They were protecting 17 species across 40 systems. The Supremacy Pact had 5,000 ships to the Coalition's 800. During a strategy meeting, General Wu Jin voiced what everyone was thinking. "We cannot win a straight military conflict. They outnumber us 6-1. "Then we do not fight straight military conflicts," Bora suggested. "We fight smart. We leverage our diversity. We make them question their own assumptions." Vexthor, now serving as scientific advisor to the Coalition, added his perspective. The Supremacy Pact species. Station Haven was built in the year following New Pyongyang. It was humanity's answer to the question of how to protect multiple refugee species efficiently. The massive space station orbited a gas giant in the Haven system, far from major trade routes but within reach of several refugee settlements. The station was enormous, almost 30 kilometers in diameter. It housed 3 million beings from 47 different species. Humans made up only 20% of the population. The rest were refugees under Guardian Coalition protection. There were Veltari in their crystalline habitats, Kixler in their ammonia-filled sections, Weaver folk in low-gravity zones, deep speakers floating in methane tanks, dozens of other species, each requiring specific environmental conditions. Commander Jae-won had been appointed station commander 6 months ago. He was a career military officer experienced in logistics and defensive operations. He ran Station Haven like a city, which it essentially was. Schools for refugee children, medical facilities for dozens of biologies, manufacturing plants producing supplies, agricultural sections growing food in various atmospheric conditions. It was also the most vulnerable target the Guardian Coalition had. The Supremacy Pact knew this. Intelligence Officer Yunji had predicted they would eventually attack the station, and she was right. The assault began without warning on a Tuesday morning station time. Jae-won was drinking coffee in his office when the alarm sounded. He immediately pulled up the tactical display and felt his heart sink. 60 Supremacy Pact warships had just emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the system. They were already accelerating toward Station Haven. "All stations, battle alert," Jae-won transmitted across the station network. "Initiate defensive protocol. Seal all sections. Prepare for combat." Station Haven had defensive weapons, but it was a civilian facility, not a military fortress. It had 40 defensive turrets and a shield system designed to repel small-scale attacks or space debris. Against 60 warships, it would last maybe an hour. Communications, get me Admiral Sang-hoon, Jae-won ordered. Emergency priority. The response came 3 minutes later. Sang-hoon's face appeared on the screen, his expression grim. Commander, we are tracking the enemy fleet. The nearest Guardian Coalition forces are 4 days away at best speed. You need to hold until we arrive. 4 days? Jae-won stared at the tactical display. Admiral, we have maybe 4 hours before they are in bombardment range. Then you hold for 4 days anyway, Sang-hoon said firmly. Those 3 million beings are counting on you. The entire galaxy is watching. Show them what the Guardian Coalition stands for. The transmission ended. Jae-won stood alone in his office for 30 seconds processing what had just been asked of him. Hold a civilian station against overwhelming military force for 4 days. It was impossible, but impossible was something humans had learned to ignore. All defensive crews report to your stations, he transmitted. Engineering, divert all available power to shields and weapons. Medical, prepare for mass casualties. All civilian populations move to designated shelter areas. The Supremacy Pact fleet stopped at maximum weapons range and transmitted a message. The speaker was a Drakmar admiral, his scarred face filling the communication screen. Station Haven. This is Admiral Korth of the Supremacy Pact. You are harboring weak species that have no right to survive. Evacuate all humans within the next hour. We will allow your people to leave. After that, we will destroy the station and everything on it. Jae-won looked at his command staff. Most were human, but some were refugees who had joined the station defense force. A Veltari technical officer, 2 Thoraxian security chiefs, a Kixlar engineer. They all looked back at him, waiting for his response. Transmit this, Jae-won said. Admiral Korth, Station Haven declines your offer. We do not abandon those under our protection. If you want this station, you will have to take it. The Drakmar admiral actually laughed. You have 3 million mouths to feed and no way to resupply. You have minimal weapons and weak shields. You have no reinforcements coming in time. You will die for species that cannot even fight for themselves. This is the human defect in its purest form. Maybe, Jae-won replied. But it is our defect, and we are proud of it. Station Haven out. He closed the channel and looked at his staff. All right, people. We have 4 days to achieve the impossible. Let us get to work. The siege began with the Supremacy Pact fleet establishing a blockade around the system. Nothing could get in or out. They did not immediately attack. Instead, they waited, letting the station's supplies dwindle. It was psychological warfare. They wanted the defenders to feel hopeless. Medical Officer Soo-jin ran the station's main hospital, a massive complex that had to handle medical emergencies for 47 different species. She had been on duty for 16 hours when the siege began, and knew she would not get rest anytime soon. The first casualties came from the initial attack. The Supremacy Pact had launched long-range missiles to test the station's defenses. Several had penetrated the shields before being destroyed, causing damage to outer sections. 23 dead, 47 injured, multiple species. Soo-jin moved through the emergency ward, triaging patients. A human with radiation burns, a Veltari with fracture damage across its crystal structure, a Kixler suffering from pressure trauma, a Weaver folk whose threads had been severed, requiring delicate reweaving. Doctor, we are running low on medical supplies, her assistant informed her. We used more than expected treating the first wave of casualties. Soo-jin pulled up the inventory. They had enough for maybe 3 days at current usage rates. Implement strict rationing. Only essential supplies for critical cases. We have to make everything last. As days passed, the situation worsened. The Supremacy Pact fleet slowly tightened the blockade, moving closer, maintaining constant pressure. They launched periodic attacks, nothing strong enough to break through, just enough to cause casualties and drain resources. Water became the first critical shortage. Station Haven recycled all water through sophisticated processing systems, but those systems required power. With shields and weapons consuming most available energy, recycling efficiency dropped. Jae-won implemented strict rationing, 2 liters per person per day for all purposes. Drinking, washing, cooking, food was next. The station had hydroponic gardens, but they could not feed 3 million beings indefinitely. Jae-won made the hardest decision of his life. He called a meeting with the leaders of all 47 refugee species. We need to implement emergency rationing, he explained. Food will be distributed based on biological necessity. Species that require more calories will receive more. Species that can survive on less will receive less. It is not fair. but it is the only way to keep everyone alive as long as possible. One of the Veltari elders spoke up. Commander, our species requires very little nutrition. We absorb energy from light and trace minerals from our environment. Reduce our rations to minimum levels. Give the food to species that need it more. The Kixlar can survive on minimal food for extended periods, added the Kixlar representative. Our metabolism can slow dramatically. We volunteered to reduce our consumption. One by one, species offered to sacrifice their own rations to help others. Jaewon felt tears in his eyes as he watched beings who had lost everything volunteer to suffer more, so that others could survive. This was what humanity had taught them. This was what compassion looked like. On the fourth day of the siege, Lieutenant Tae-sung, now assigned to station security, noticed something unusual. Veltari refugees were gathering in one of the outer hab rings. He went to investigate and found hundreds of them assembling into formation. "What are you doing?" he asked their leader. The Veltari elder's color shifted to determined patterns. "We are going to help defend the station. We may be fragile, but we can operate weapon systems. We can monitor sensors. We can fight." "You are civilians," Tae-sung protested. "You do not have to do this." "You taught us that protecting others is worth any cost," the elder replied. "These are our families on this station. Our children, our future. We will fight for them as you fight for us." By the end of the day, 600 Veltari had volunteered for defense duties. So had thousands of other refugees. Kixlar engineers reinforced damaged sections. Weaver folk repaired communication lines. Even the deep speakers, who could barely move outside their methane tanks, volunteered to help coordinate sensor operations. Soo-jin watched this transformation from her hospital. Beings who had arrived as helpless refugees were now standing up to defend their new home. She treated the volunteers as they came through, checking their health, and saw something remarkable in their eyes. Determination, courage, hope. "Doctor," a young Veltari said to her, its crystal body reflecting the emergency lights. "Will we survive this?" Soo-jin thought about lying, about offering Faye comfort, but she decided on truth. "I do not know. We are outnumbered and running out of supplies. But I know we will fight. I know we will not give up. And I know that what we do here matters whether we win or lose." The young Veltari's colors shifted to acceptance. "Then we fight." On the fifth day, the situation became critical. Food supplies were nearly exhausted. Water was rationed to 1 liter per person. Medical supplies were gone. The shields were at 40% capacity and dropping. Casualty. Intelligence Officer Yoon-ji had been analyzing data for 3 months when she finally saw the pattern. She sat in her secure office on Europa, surrounded by holographic displays showing troop movements, economic data, and cultural information from across the galaxy. Her eyes were red from lack of sleep, but she had finally found what she was looking for. "I understand now," she whispered to herself. She immediately requested a meeting with the Guardian Coalition command staff. 2 days later, she stood in front of Admiral Sang-hoon, General Woo Jin, Ambassador Dae-hyun, and Director Vexthor, presenting her findings. "I have been trying to understand why the Supremacy Pact species think so differently from us," Yoon-ji began, pulling up a series of planetary images. "Look at these homeworlds. This is Drakmar Prime, where the Drakmar evolved. Notice anything unusual?" Vexthor studied the image. Extreme volcanic activity, toxic atmosphere, radiation levels far higher than standard life-supporting worlds. "Exactly. Now look at this one." Yoon-ji showed another world, equally harsh. "This is the Korvax homeworld. Same pattern. High radiation, scarce resources, extreme weather. And this is the Thresh homeworld. Same thing." She pulled up images of all 19 Supremacy Pact species homeworlds. Every single one was a nightmare environment where life had to fight desperately just to exist. "These species evolved in hell," Yoon-ji said. "They survived because they were aggressive, competitive, and ruthless. Compassion would have been a fatal weakness on their worlds. They eliminated it through evolution." Dae-hyun leaned forward. "And our homeworld?" Yoon-ji showed Earth. Blue oceans, green continents, white clouds. Earth was challenging but not impossible. Humans could survive by cooperating. We could afford compassion because our environment allowed it. The same is true for most Guardian Coalition species. We evolved in worlds where working together was advantageous. "So this is not about good versus evil," Woo-jin said slowly. "It is about different evolutionary responses to different challenges." "Yes," Yoon-ji confirmed. The Supremacy Pact species genuinely believe they are right. In their experience, compassion equals death. Aggression equals survival. They are not monsters. They are products of their environments. Vexthor's scales changed color thoughtfully. This explains much. But it does not solve our problem. They will still try to destroy us. Actually, it might solve our problem, Yunji said. Because if their philosophy is based on environmental pressure, what happens when we change the environment? What happens when we show them that cooperation works better than competition? Meanwhile, across the galaxy, something unexpected was happening. The Guardian Coalition's philosophy was spreading organically, not through official channels but through individual actions and personal observations. On the trade station Nexus 7, a neutral hub where dozens of species conducted business, a crisis erupted. A plague had broken out in the station's lower levels, affecting multiple species. The station's medical facilities were overwhelmed. The station administrator, a member of a neutral species, sent requests for assistance to nearby powers. The Supremacy Pact species ignored the request. It was not their problem, but a Guardian Coalition medical ship diverted from its route to help. Medical Officer Su-Jin led the response team. She spent 2 weeks on Nexus 7, treating patients from species she had never encountered before. She worked until she collapsed from exhaustion, was revived, and immediately returned to work. A trader named Zelkon, a member of a species that had remained neutral in the growing conflict, watched Su-Jin work. His species valued profit above all else. The idea of helping strangers for no payment was alien to his culture. "Why do you do this?" he asked Su-Jin during one of her rare breaks. "You receive no payment. Your ship loses money by being here. You gain nothing." Su-Jin looked at him with tired eyes. "I gain the knowledge that people are alive who would otherwise be dead." That is enough. Zelkon could not understand this, but he also could not deny that what Su-Jin was doing was effective. The plague was being contained. Lives were being saved, and the gratitude from those saved was creating something unexpected. Goodwill, trust, connection. 2 months later, when the Guardian Coalition requested permission to establish a supply depot near Zelkon's trade routes, he approved it. When asked why by his business partners, he said, "They helped us when they had no reason to. Now we help them. It is only fair." This pattern repeated across hundreds of worlds. Guardian Coalition forces helped during disasters, provided medical aid during epidemics, rescued stranded ships, protected vulnerable settlements. They did not ask for payment or political favors. They just helped. And slowly, species that had been neutral started quietly supporting the coalition, not officially but through small actions, sharing intelligence, allowing ships to refuel, providing supplies at cost, individual captains and commanders making personal choices to support what they saw as right. Captain Hyunwoo noticed this trend during a patrol near contested space. His ship had been damaged in a skirmish with Supremacy Pact raiders. He limped toward the nearest station, expecting to be turned away since it was controlled by a neutral species. Instead, the station administrator granted immediate docking permission. "We saw what your people did at Station Haven," the administrator said. "We saw how you stood together. Our government says we must remain neutral, but I'm in charge of this station and I say you can dock here. We will help repair your ship." Hyunwoo was stunned. "We cannot pay standard rates. Our resources are committed to refugee protection. Then pay what you can, or pay nothing. Just keep doing what you are doing." Similar incidents occurred across the galaxy. The Guardian Coalition was winning hearts without trying. They were simply being consistent with their values, and others were noticing. Back on Earth, Vexthor presented his latest findings to a packed assembly of scientists from multiple species. The topic was evolutionary psychology and the development of interspecies empathy. "I have spent my career studying what I called the human defect," Vexthor began. "I believed that humanity's excessive empathy was an evolutionary mistake. I was wrong." He pulled up brain scans comparing species. "Look at what happens when different species are exposed to images of suffering from other species. Most species show minimal neural activation. Their brains do not recognize alien suffering as important. But humans, Veltari, Thraxians, and several other Guardian Coalition species show significant activation." A scientist in the audience raised a question. "But the Veltari and Thraxians did not show this trait before contact with humans." "This is recent development." Exactly, Vexthor said, his scales brightening with excitement. The trait is contagious, not biologically, but culturally and neurologically. When species interact closely with humans, when they experience being protected and valued, their brains begin to change. Mirror neurons activate. Empathy pathways strengthen. The trait spreads. He showed data from Veltari refugees who had lived alongside humans for 2 years. Their neural patterns had changed dramatically. They now showed empathy responses similar to humans when encountering suffering in other species. What we are witnessing, Vexthor said, is not just a political or military conflict. We are witnessing an evolutionary divergence. 2 paths forward for galactic civilization. One based on competition and dominance, one based on cooperation and compassion. And the evidence suggests that the cooperation model is more adaptable, more resilient, and more successful in the long term. A Shakarn scientist challenged him. Director, our species eliminated empathy 3,000 years ago and became very successful. How do you explain that? Vexthor was ready for this question. Define successful. We expanded across 50 worlds. We built a powerful military. We achieved economic stability. But what have we created culturally? What art have we produced? What revolutionary science? What deep friendships with other species? The room fell silent. We survived, Vexthor continued, but we stopped thriving. We became efficient but empty. I believe this is why a significant faction of our people chose to join the Guardian Coalition. We want to feel something again. We want to matter for reasons beyond survival. The presentation ended with a standing ovation from half the audience and shocked silence from the other half. But Vexthor had planted seeds of doubt in minds across the galaxy. Then came the event that changed everything. The Supremacy Pact had been planning a massive offensive against Guardian Coalition territories. Intelligence Officer Yunji detected the buildup and warned Coalition commanders. The attack would hit 6 targets simultaneously, overwhelming defenses through sheer numbers. But 3 days before the planned offensive, something unexpected happened. One of the Supremacy Pact species withdrew from the alliance. The Korvax hegemony, a militaristic species that had been a founding member of the Supremacy Pact, announced they were pulling out. Their statement was brief. We have observed the Guardian Coalition carefully. We have seen their methods and their results. We have concluded that our alliance with the Supremacy Pact no longer serves our interests. We will remain neutral in this conflict. It was not a full endorsement of the coalition, but it was a crack in the Supremacy Pact's unity. Admiral Sang-hoon received a private communication from a Korvax fleet commander explaining the real reason. We watched what happened at Station Haven, W. 5 years after the first Veltari evacuation, the Galactic Council held its final session. The ancient chamber that had witnessed 10,000 years of galactic politics was packed with representatives from over 200 species. But today was different. Today they were not meeting to conduct business as usual. They were meeting to dissolve the council itself. Ambassador Dae-hyun stood at the central podium, now older, his hair showing streaks of gray. He had been appointed to lead the transition committee that would establish a new form of galactic governance. Around him sat representatives from the Guardian Coalition, former Supremacy Pact species who had joined the coalition, and dozens of neutral species who had decided that the new philosophy was worth embracing. The Galactic Council served its purpose for 10 millennia, Dae-hyun began. It maintained order. It facilitated trade. It prevented total war. But it was built on a principle that we now recognize as flawed: survival of the fittest. The strong survive, the weak perish, and this is called natural law. He paused, looking around at the assembled species. We have learned a different truth. We have learned that civilization's purpose is not to mimic nature's cruelty, but to transcend it. We have learned that protecting the vulnerable makes us stronger, not weaker. We have learned that diversity of species, cultures, and viewpoints creates resilience that homogeneity cannot match. Klaxith, the insectoid who had led the council for so long, spoke from his position. His voice was weary. Ambassador, you have won. The philosophy you brought has spread across the galaxy. Most species now embrace your sanctuary accords. But I must ask, what happens when the next crisis comes? What happens when resources are scarce and choices must be made? Will your compassion survive reality? Dae-hyun met his eyes. Counselor, compassion is not naive optimism. It is a conscious choice to value all sapient life. It is hard, it requires sacrifice. But the alternative is a galaxy where might makes right, where the weak are discarded, where every species lives in fear of becoming vulnerable. We choose a different path. Not because it is easy, but because it is right. The vote to dissolve the Council and establish the reformed galactic community passed with 82% approval. The Sanctuary Accords became the founding document of the new government. Article 1 remained unchanged. All sapient life has inherent value. Advanced civilizations have a moral obligation to protect those who cannot protect themselves. Dae-Hyun was elected as the first Secretary General of the reformed galactic community. He accepted the position knowing it would consume the rest of his life. But as he looked at the diverse species who had voted for him, species who had once been enemies now working together, he felt that the cost was worthwhile. Captain Hyun-woo, now promoted to Admiral, stood on the bridge of the flagship Unity, watching as the Sanctuary fleet conducted joint exercises with former Supremacy Pact vessels. It was surreal. Drakmar ships flying in formation with human vessels. Korvax cruisers coordinating with Veltari support craft. Species that had been trying to kill each other 5 years ago now training together. "Admiral, how do you feel about this?" his executive officer asked. "Your sister died because of the Drakmar. Now we are allies with them." Hyun-woo was quiet for a long moment. "I will never forget what they did. I will never forgive the ones who ordered that attack. But these Drakmar are different. They chose to leave the Supremacy Pact. They chose to embrace a different philosophy. They are not responsible for what their government did 5 years ago." He turned to look at his officer. "My sister believed in the Sanctuary doctrine. She believed that all beings could change, could grow, could become better. If I let my hatred consume me, I dishonor her memory. So I work with them. I train them. I trust them to have my back in battle, because that is what builds a better galaxy." The integration was not perfect. There were incidents. Old hatreds flared up. Cultural misunderstandings caused conflicts. But the structure was in place to handle these problems. Mediation teams, cultural liaison officers, joint training programs. Slowly, painfully, the galaxy was learning to work together. Engineer Yu-jin had become the director of the Refugee Integration Program, overseeing the settlement of over 50 million refugees across 300 worlds. She was exhausted constantly, but she had also never felt more fulfilled. She stood on the surface of New Pyongyang, now partially rebuilt. The world would never be the same. The scars of the bombardment would remain for generations. But life had returned. Humans were rebuilding their cities. And alongside them, Veltari refugees had chosen to settle here, helping with reconstruction. A Veltari elder approached her, its crystalline body reflecting the sunlight. Yu-jin recognized it as one of the beings she had helped evacuate from Veltar Prime 5 years ago. "Engineer Yu-jin," the Veltari said, its colors warm and grateful. "Do you remember when you first met my people? You said we did not need to offer anything in exchange for your help." "I remember," Yu-jin replied. "I did not understand then, but I understand now. You gave us safety, and in return we learned your values. We learned to care for others as you cared for us. Now we pass that forward. We help rebuild this world not because we owe a debt, but because this is what civilized beings do. You taught us that." Yu-jin felt tears in her eyes. "You are teaching others now. The Veltari refugee assistance programs are among the most effective in the galaxy. Because we remember what it is like to need help," the elder said. "We will never forget." Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out. Species that had been saved by the Guardian Coalition were now helping save others. The Kixler were providing engineering expertise to refugee settlements. The Weaver folk were teaching their unique crafting skills. The Deep Speakers were sharing their advanced mathematics. Each species contributing what they could, creating a web of mutual support. On Veltar Prime, the homeworld that had started everything, a massive monument was being built. Jisoo attended the dedication ceremony, now elderly but still sharp. She walked slowly through the crystal gardens, marveling at how the world had recovered. The monument was a collaborative work by artists from 20 species. At its center was a sculpture showing beings from multiple species standing together, protecting something precious. Around the base were inscribed the names of every being who had died in the conflicts of the past 5 years. Human names, Veltari names, Theraxian names, names from 47 different languages and cultures. The Veltari who had questioned her 5 years ago, now ancient and massive, stood beside the monument. Dr. Jisoo, you saved my grandchildren that day when you landed on our world. Now their children are being born into a galaxy where they have a future. How can we thank you? Jisoo shook her head. You already have. You have taken what we gave you and made it grow. You have taught others. You have shown the galaxy that compassion is not weakness. That is the greatest thanks possible. In the military academy that now trained officers from 30 species, Corporal Min Seo's daughter, Cadet Hanul, prepared for graduation. She stood in formation with her classmates. Humans, Veltari, Shakarn, Thraxian, Drakmar, and dozens of other species. They wore the same uniform. They had survived the same training. They had become brothers and sisters regardless of what bodies they wore. The graduation ceremony was conducted in 15 languages simultaneously, with translators ensuring everyone could understand. The commandant, a Thraxian warrior named Brektor, who had trained under pilot Dong Hyun, addressed the graduates. You are the first generation to grow up in the reformed galactic community, Brektor said, his translated words carrying across the assembly. You do not remember the old ways when species feared each other, when the weak were left to die, when compassion was called weakness. You have known only the new way, where species stand together, where protecting others is honored, where every life has value. He paused, his massive form radiating dignity. But do not think this means your path will be easy. The Drakmar Empire still exists, refusing to join the community. There are pirates, raiders, and those who reject our values. You will be called upon to defend the principles we hold dear. You will face hard choices. You may die protecting those who cannot protect themselves. The graduate stood silent, absorbing his words. But you will not die for nothing, Brektor continued. You will die knowing that you stood for something greater than yourself. You will die knowing that because of your sacrifice, others will live. This is the burden and the honor of our calling. He raised one massive limb in salute. Today you take the guardian oath. Speak it with pride. Hanul spoke in unison with her classmates, each in their own language. We protect those who cannot protect themselves. We stand between the vulnerable and the void. We are the shield that asks nothing in return. We are the hope that says no being will face darkness alone. We are the guardians of all life. This we swear in the audience. Lieutenant Tae-sung watched his former corporal's daughter graduate. Minzeo had died 3 years ago. Complications from the plasma wound she took protecting that Veltari juvenile. But she had lived to see her daughter accepted into the academy. She had lived to see the galaxy change. After the ceremony, Hanul found Tae-sung in the crowd. Lieutenant, my mother told me stories about you. Up to